Welcome friends to another 40k video. Horus vs Leman Russ on the Vengeful Spirit from Wolfsbane by Guy Haley. Let's get into it. They speak. Horus makes overtures that he has seen the fate of the Imperium under their father. Russ accuses back, "You are a traitor, you are a tyrant, you are a monster." Horus then attacks the Emperor. He cares for nothing but himself and his ascension to godhood, and says Russ comes when their father whistles. Russ tries to persuade Horus that the Emperor can heal him. Horus says now he's the master of his own destiny. He'll bring mankind into a new era. Horus says what he and Russ could do together, but Russ turns him down and the talk is ended. Horus charged. Russ met his maul with a double block using his spear. Then Horus struck and Russ staggered back. With every strike, the War Master thundered with warp magic. Demonic light lit his eyes, and Russ saw the changes in his brother, that he could not defeat him. The reflexes of the Space Wolf Primarch saved him from being crushed by the maul, and he was glad of his spear's reach. And like Rabute later, with the Emperor's sword, this weapon of his father's making lent him power. A thrust with it arced with blue lightning, and when he swept it to slash his brother, it left light in its wake. The spear pushed back the unholy light around Horus. This is a weirding blade. Its point moved through holes in Horus's defences. The War Master blocked them with his claw or maul, and when the weapons clashed, they lit the area around them in flame. Russ's mind kept evaluating the fighting space marines around him. His forces still held the way back. His sons might escape, but he expected to die. He swung the spear like a sword. Horus parried with the claw, the strike sounding like the peals of a bell. Horus was finding it hard to counter the frosty of the Space Wolves Primarch. Russ jabbed where the War Master's armour was weakest, below his plastron. The War Master moved out of the way. His claw came for Russ. Intending to rip his head off, Russ moved, but Horus got some of the pauldrons of Russ's armour, which exploded. As a counter, the armour bathed Horus in a deadly cold, but it did not affect him. And Horus moved the barbs of his claw deep into Russ's arm. Russ gritted his teeth, whilst Horus smiled in victory and swung up his maul to kill his brother. At this moment, Russ revealed his ruse and twisted free of the claw, damaging his armour and his own flesh further to get at Horus. And with every ounce of his strength, he thrust the spear one-handed into Horus's side. A shockwave blasted out from the impact, and Russ says he did not have to win. Leman Russ pushed the spear further into his brother's guts. Horus roared. He dropped the maul and shook. Soulfire blazed from his mouth, and the spear shone with light. Even Russ struggled to hold the weapon in place. Horus released Russ and staggered back. Russ flowed and ground the spear in his brother's wound. Horus grasped the spear shaft to stop more damage and fell to his knees. The unholy aura gone, along with his confidence. Russ checks, he speaks with the real Horus Lupercal. Horus says he had to do it, but he's worse than the Emperor. Russ says they can still help him. Horus replies, with a voice from beyond space and time, perhaps the creatures of the warp reaching back for their pawn. "I defy you. And Russ must die if he cannot accept chaos." The talon of Horus entered the side of Russ, cutting deep. As the book tells it, the barbs ripped away chunks of muscle. The angel fields scorched his bones. And then Russ was thrown off its end across the chamber like he was a child. Horus says for a moment he was good enough. And that's when Russ's soul is in the warp. He will see things like Horus does. Russ's body tries to heal, but the hurt is grave. Ripped ribs and organs pulped. Leman says Horus will never win, and Horus swings them all down. Leman's fate is sealed. But a grey blur intercepts the strike. And then a second Space Wolf did the same. Horus continued to slaughter them until there were too many, but they would not stop. This bought time for Russ to drag himself away. The deaths of the wolves rose to the hundreds, but they managed to pull Russ away, protecting him with their Terminator plate. and left the Vengeful spirit using the secured evac route. Horus shouts, "Run to father, whelp, run like the cur you are." And as the book ends this part, it says, "Then the door shut on the carnage, and Blademaker Ironwolves moved in to wield it closed." So now, friends, I turn this over to you. What do you think of this conflict between Horus and Leman Russ? What do you think will happen later in the story? If you're not familiar with it, drop me a comment down below.